see unless you're in the air. You can feel it on the ground. If you can feel it on the ground, you don't know why these things work. But as long as we can reduce the excess infrastructure, there is so much money. The big winners are the paving contractors. Really. I mean, you got a garage that's 20 foot wide. Are you going to drive the edge of your tire into the 20 foot wide garage when your driveway is 20 foot wide? No, you're going to use 16 feet of that. But a paving contractor will make that extra, what's that, 20% more? You're getting charged per square foot. Why wouldn't you taper the driveway and pay 40% less? Then you can put grass strips in where you're not driving. Now you're paying 50% less. But it's so easy to do this on a plan because we don't have to design anything. We don't have to make an effort. So then it gets built like that. But it costs someone $4,000 more in pavement. That pays for a front porch, maybe. Not a nice front porch, but a front porch. But see, this is the things, is to transfer the dollars so that we can do some things like this. You know? Yeah.
I think you can hear me. I have the same question that the gentleman in the front asked that's on the Planning Commission, and that's how do cities work with developers to implement some of the things that you're putting in, recommending be put into place. And,
well,
and I guess I'd like to ask the question of you, but I'd also like to ask it of the Fargo planning staff that's here, because I understand that you're here as part of their effort to gather information for the revision of their comprehensive plan. So maybe you could both address that.
I can answer some of this. I have a deep respect for people on planning commissions. I know my clients don't necessarily have that because they have to go against them. And I feel that if someone has to listen till all hours of the night to the junk that they have to listen to get to be convinced, and they're sitting on that planning commission and council because they care about the city, I have a deep respect for those people. Developers don't necessarily have that respect because they're trying to get a thing approved and they see that as a roadblock to approval. To answer your question, we wrote this book to open people's eyes. Part of the way we envision working is not to get hired by the cities. I would rather not do that is open up a planning consultant. So, for example, Mike Kramer with Short, Elliott, and Hendrickson is here. They're a huge engineering firm. They've bought into the system. They can then sell their services as planning consultants, because that's what they do to cities. And it's not just SEH, but other engineering firms that we don't look to, we want to train the people, the industry, to provide these services. So once they're in there and the city can say, here's a list of consultants that have bought into this vision, they can then go get the work and we will back them up to make it happen as best we can so that cities can work through this, because I do this working for the developers, and I firmly believe that the ordinances are very close, but they just need some minor changes, and it won't scare developers away. It will reward them for doing good development, and it will reward good builders. Because there's really nothing in here, and we don't want to say everybody's got a cove and everybody's got to do this stuff. We don't want to even say that we're right. But there's certain elements that city can determine the character that they want to grow, and then all they have to do is reward the developers for bringing that to the table. It's very simple, and it's not very complex. And, you know, there's been things in the past, and I kind of roll my eyes when I, hear some of these things that are points and things like that, because people on the city council are not rocket science. None of us are. And you make it complex, and it gets gummed up, and then the developer gets all upset because you made it difficult. You can make it very simple and not so restrictive. And that's really what we envision, but we would rather not do the work. We would rather teach people to do the work so then that has a life beyond us. It's very important that we develop the programs to teach beyond what we have done. So we envision that your consultant we would work through, and then we would make sure that the consultant is serving the city, and then they can serve other cities, and then they're getting work, and then the other consultants will go, wow, they're making this happen, we better learn it. So that's how the world grows. That's how our economy works. And so that's what we envision is not being the end-all, but training, going into sharing and training. Of course, you know, the money that we make on it's on the software, so we are making some money on it. We are profitable from that standpoint. But that's something that knowledge is a gift that you give forever. Yeah.
Just to try to respond, I guess, to your question in terms of from the staff position, working with developers, you know, what is our role or how do we interact with developers when projects come in? I think Rick has really touched on a lot of things that are actually in place for the city of Fargo. Our codes really are set up where there's minimum standards that have to be met. I think our staff does a good job trying to work within that to try to get, you know, as best of a project that you can get out of that. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, you have those minimum standards that have to be met. I know the city, I think one of the things that we've got in place, and in hindsight is always 20/20, and hopefully we can learn from our mistakes as we move forward. But maybe looking back a number of years throughout the 70s and 80s, maybe even to the early 90s, one of the things that the city was doing a lot of was PUDs, plan unit development, and everything was you know, more of a site design, and there was all this specific planning that was put in place. The beauty of that is maybe you had some unique stuff on the front end, but it's very difficult on the backside to change things. It seemed very arduous, time-consuming, took a long time to go through the process. And so I think there was a conscious effort to go to a code that established, okay, here's the standard, here's the bar, you got a project that meets these standards, you should be able to get through that process very quickly. I think we probably do that. The downside of that is we probably aren't as creative as we can be. There's a lot of things that you look at, wow, we could have done that better, but it does in fact meet that minimum standard. One of the things I think is exciting about this very process that we're getting into, and the reason for these forums, is our comprehensive plan. We know we can do better. We want to hear from citizens. What is it that you want to see? You know, one of the comments was made is, you know, who or what is Fargo? You know, if you were to put a name on Fargo in terms of trying to identify who and what we are, I don't know if we can do that. And it's an opportunity, I think, that we have to actually say, you know, put a statement out there that says, you know, this is Fargo. We're unique. We've got character. This exciting place to live, work, and play, those kind of things. And again, we can do better. So it's really us getting together, saying what it is that we want to have. Clearly, there's a lot of innovative ideas that I think we're seeing here from Rick and his team that could be applied probably to our code and the development of our community. So pretty exciting. With that, I know we're getting a little later, so I know you guys have a drawing. I'll let you guys get into that.
What I want to do, I have one more question from the young lady over here, so I'm going to do that. But I would like you also to start filling out those forms that we asked you to evaluate our seminar while I'm passing around. And Rick's going to pull a card for a drawing for one of the books here.
Okay, and I need the box to pull the card. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. What's the question?
I have a question on
Yeah.
navigability.
Yeah.
Right now, you know, with the typical grid, you have some sense of an address.
Mhm.
That's 13 blocks east and
Mhm.
9 blocks south. How do you maintain some sense of street naming that kind of makes sense without people that don't have a GPS or are out-of-town visitors, say?
Yeah, one of the things that we did, if you look at our early work, it's we were concentrating quite a bit on the coving for the numbers. And if you look at the more recent work, being the last 10 years, there are very few streets. I'll just pull up this enclave plan. The enclave one's a little bit unusual, but it's very typical of our designs. There's very few streets. You would have a numbering, you'd have a main street that everything loops off of. So there is a method to the madness, I'd call it. You know, we have typically one on Main Street that defines the neighborhood, and then if you leave the Main Street, it's either cul-de-sac or you loop back into it. So you're always into that Main Street. As far as numbering, once you go into a free form, you're really starting at that one street number and going around it. And the worst thing you could do is have like Promersburger Lane, Promersburger Court, Promersburger cul-de-sac and stuff like that, because you don't want the same name. That will confuse people too. Is you want unique names for your streets, because then that throws you off. But when you look at the designs that we create, there are very few streets. It could be scaled up, scaled down. You can actually do regional streets the same way. And but again, that's our style. When you look at urban redevelopment, if you wanted some of those DVDs, we're keeping the grid. We're abandoning the streets. We're abandoning some streets. That's called the Greenbelt movement, or it's also called landscape urbanism. But from a addressing standpoint, you've got a street that just keeps on growing numbered, another street that has growing numbered, and another street that grows numbers. But it's no longer in northeast, southwest. So it's still manageable, but it's different.
I have Rick Cole, one of these
Okay.
names for
The lucky person who, wow, you cheated. Big card. Amy Nash. Ah, great, thanks. Hope you enjoy that. Thank you. I know there's not a perfect answer, and there's no such thing as perfect design. I mean, you can't get there. I mean, everything has its problems. So I'm not saying any of this is Shangri-La and Wonder and Utopia. It's just we're trying to make it better. And, yeah.
Can I ask one more question that I think might come up? You've talked about higher densities, which the city has desire for.
Mhm.
You've given examples where things would be, if your ideas or others would be followed, it looks nicer, works better. From a pro forma standpoint, a financial analysis, would a developer take the traditional approach that they do today? They run their pro forma. Here's my cash on cash. Here's my return. They do one of yours. How does it compare?
The performa on this one's available by Skip Preble, who did it. It came out $900,000 ahead of the previous plan. This was the only plan I ever did without the developer's knowledge. Skip gave me that before cookie cutter plan. And in the process of analyzing the plan, I'd realized I had replanned the development. And I was going, okay, great. 6 hours later, it's done. You know, now what? So I called the developer and I said, you know, I got a different plan. Keep in mind, this is an approved preliminary plat, but there was a problem that the